r/AskReddit, former anti-vaxxers. What caused you to change your mind? I'll give you an historical one. In 1736 I lost one of my sons. A fine boy of 4 years old, by the smallpox, taken in the common way. I long regretted bitterly, and still regret, that I had not given it to him by inoculation. This I mention for the sake of parents who omit that operation, on the supposition that they should never forgive themselves if a child died under it. My example showing that the regret may be the same either way and that, therefore, the safer should be chosen. Benjamin Franklin. I don't really know why I didn't like the idea of vaccines, but I didn't, until my girlfriend had gotten pregnant, and then I stepped on a rusty nail. Like the only way to stop tetanus is the vaccine. Edit. My girlfriend was pregnant, and asked what I would do if my daughter picked up tetanus. After I told her I stepped on rusty nail, was unaware how tetanus or really any vaccines work, if that gives an insight to anti-vaxxers. Not all, but yeah. My ex-husband was a very controlling person, and did not want our kids to get vaccines. I was always so scared knowing my kids had no protection. One day one of our kids scraped themselves on a fence and the school called me. I snapped and took them straight to an urgent care for a tetanus shot and just started secretly getting all my kids vaccines. We eventually divorced, and now all my kids are fully caught up. I met my Miel, who is the ultimate anti-vaxxer, and realized how fucking crazy she sounds, and I didn't want to end up like *THAT**. Also I have a baby daughter who I would like to live a long healthy life. I was a stereotypical naturalistic vegan type. Didn't believe in essential oils or crystal healing or anything. Just believed, mistakenly, that you couldn't beat nature, and that vaccines were messing around with my baby's natural immunity growth. I believed they were an unnecessary risk. I knew my decision was controversial, so I kept it quiet. I wouldn't have been out campaigning or splashing it all over social media. It was a private decision. I held off until he was 2. We don't routinely vaccinate for chickenpox here in the UK, so he got it, which is expected. However, he got a bacterial infection on top, and had to spend a night in hospital. Nothing too traumatic, but I realized I didn't have the balls to play nature v. medicine anymore. I read an article about a mom who changed her view on vaccinations, because of how radical the anti-vax groups were. A lot of them were anti-gay, anti-abortion, and so crazy about all of it. Pro the dumbest shit, like oils. Pushed the agendas of things that were obviously false. It made her step back and change her entire outlook on the anti-vax movement. I wish I could find this article. It was pretty interesting. Probably on Facebook. My mom is anti-vax, and I'm reminded every day of how annoying she is, because she's also against vaccines for COVID-19. And thinks that the whole rule about wearing face masks is to move America to Islamic rule with women covering their faces and everything. She's also hugely Islamophobic, and long story short, I hate being home. Not me, but my cousin. She was extremely anti-vax for most of her life, and she refused to vaccinate her kids when they were born. Her second baby caught whooping cough. Passed it to her first kid, and they both almost died. According to her, nearly losing her kids made her realize that she was an idiot for not vaccinating them. Well, after years of deluding myself into the belief that vaccines were evil, I finally hit the wall. I learned more about vaccines, and why they were really necessary. I think it was my fear of the unknown that prevented me from seeing that science saves lives. I had a really good teacher in that regard, and it ended up being a pretty great time in my life. I mean, on top of realizing that shots weren't bad things, I started getting an allowance and my 10th birthday party was fucking lit. I was caught into the anti-vax propaganda after my younger sister was said to have autism. Reddit helped me change my mind, with people providing evidence of anti-vaxxers' stupidity. Edit. Thank you for my first award ever. I thought it would get lost and new. I grew past the age of 12, and realized how stupid my parents have been. The research changed. I had my eldest shortly before Wakefield was debunked. When internet forums were way more common than Facebook and mommy blogs were all the rage a la Julia and Julia. It was also about the time the CDC proactively began removing thoramine thimerosal from vaccines, just in case. The pediatricians didn't fight me on it. I met and married my husband, and he was pro-vaccine. Wakefield was multi-disproved, and we stared a delayed schedule. Then it came out that he was being paid for his results, and he was developing a different measles vaccine. My next two were fully vaccinated on schedule. My mom and dad used to be anti-vaxxers, until I was almost kicked out of the school I was accepted into for not having the required vaccinations. Back then this school was a really good school that was hard to get into. And my parents didn't want me to go to a normal school, and so they started googling until eventually they found out it wasn't what they thought it was. They originally thought, and kinda still do, vaccines were just mercury mixed with a virus along with mind control chemicals. I didn't like needles. Then my mom told me I could stay home from school the next day. Literally had someone on Facebook tell me today that humans lived as long as it is, and that science shouldn't be trusted. My mum's cousin and his wife converted to Catholicism and became anti-vax. Their children nearly died from diphtheria. They got them vaccinated after that. No, I'm not saying Catholicism is inherently anti-vax, just how it happened in their family. I grew up and realized my mom was wrong thanks to my now hubs convincing me. I got many vaccines in college, and I'm doing just fine. My mom gave us some vaccines like the tetanus vac, but that's about it. I was never anti-vaxxer, but I want to tell someone my story. I'm 14 right now. When I was little, I got some vaccines, and I thought that it was enough. 2 years ago I looked into my documents, and I realized that I didn't got like 15 vaccines. Then, I got mad at my mother, who always told me that I was vaccinated. She confessed that she also lied to my dad. We both were thinking I was safe. Luckily, after that my dad brought me to the doctor and now I'm fully vaccinated. Sorry for my bad English. Coronavirus. I've never feared for my life before. This pandemic made me realize what it would have been like in the days of polio. Not me, my mom refused to get me vaccinated against HPV, mainly because the news were covering stories about people getting sick from it. I explained to her that, even if the vaccine made me a little sick, that would still be better than potentially getting cervical cancer. I then got the vaccine. My mom is actually turning into an anti-vaxxer. She's been roaming around on right-wing, conspiracy-filled Twitter for a good 2 years now. Believes in the Illuminati. The 7 satanic clans that control the world, that whole stuff. And though me and my 2 siblings have been vaccinated, as far as I know, I just discovered, at 20 years old, that she wishes she hadn't, and that she has refused to give us 2/3 vaccines. I don't remember which ones, but I should probably look into that now. Thanks for the reminder. A friend wasn't completely anti-vax, but had her first kid vaccinated slowly, because of the mercury and all. Someone finally pointed out that the nasty stuff was like the sodium and chlorine in table salt. Deadly poisons by themselves, but harmless as presented. She said she would never have questioned vaccines if that had been explained in more vaccine posters and such. Instead they were just the diseases worse than mercury, which implied the mercury was still in a poisonous form. I'll note her kid was fully vaccinated before starting school of any kind. I realized that other anti-vaxxers were also into other absolutely batshit ideas: flat earth, young earth creationism, essential oils, and general anti-science nonsense. Fortunately, I realized this while my oldest was still a small baby and we quickly caught her up to schedule. I was brainwashed by people I trusted as a teen. It took realizing someone who believes chemtrails are a thing, or that some dude took animals and dinosaurs onto a huge boat, while a deity flooded the entire earth may not be a completely stable person. Realizing that I had to build a mountain of conspiracy theories in order to justify believing that vaccines don't work in light of the overwhelming evidence that they do. I was very skeptical of vaxxing, until I found out it wasn't a German form of manscaping. I have friends that only changed their mind because it was mandatory to enroll their kids in a daycare when on a prolonged holiday. I don't understand people. You wouldn't take your new puppy outside without vaccinations. My dad used to talk at me for fucking hours about how vaccines were full of dangerous chemicals, how they caused autism, and how the government was using them as some kind of population control. He believes every word of it, and so much more about other crazy shit. Then I googled what he told me. The 1,000 or so results dispelled his bullshit pretty quick. My friend had a sweet dog, and refused to vaccinate. To much fanfare among our mutual friends, the dog died of parvo. That was how I started thinking for myself, and looking into the risks versus benefits of vaccines. Not really answering the question. But, in England it's part of the GCSE biology syllabus, to learn about how vaccines work. So I don't know any anti-vaxxers, presumably because we're educated about vaccines. I do have a friend who just moved here from South Africa who's very anti-vax, and I'm trying to convert her. She's convinced they cause autism. Even though I get the flu vaccine every year, and don't have any trace of autism. Almost dying of whooping cough, after having a baby. My whole family caught it. I coughed so hard I broke ribs, with a 2-year-old and new baby. We coughed for 2 years, and had to do nebulizer breathing treatments on 3 people 4 times a day. The antibiotics for pink eye, ear infections that are complications of pertussis sent us into celiacs. Yeah, I wish we'd been vaccinated. I'm on the edge right now with it. I grew up a Mormon, which turned out to be a cult. They perpetuate a culture that believes in pseudoscience. They aren't all anti-vaxxers, but it creates the perfect environment for it. I vaccinated my first daughter up to her 12-month shots, and stopped when I had my son. I have been terrified of how the vaccines will affect them, even though nothing ever happened with my daughter. My narcissistic militant anti-vaxxers, and scared the shit out of me. Once I was able to question my beliefs that I had grown up with, I've decided that it's time to start doing it now with everything in my life. I have plans to sit down and view the pro-vax side of things now. If anyone has any resources on hand for me to look at, I would really appreciate it. My mom did all what she could to not vaccinate me, and had even evidence for vax equals bad. My brother got vaccinated before, and my mother was serious that this caused his pertussis. It took me long time to distrust her beliefs, and when I finally needed to decide what to do with my son, I read up a lot on that topic. And man, you can find a lot of information. Even conclusive bullshit, which gets correct numbers from the Paul Ehrlich Institute on vaccinations, but put in a totally negative perspective. Nonetheless, I got me and my son vaccinated 2 years ago, and we are both healthy and don't suffer any side effects. My cousin was an anti-vaxxer as a young hippie college student. She decided to go to nursing school a few years later, and shortly after starting school she vaccinated him. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one.